Being mindful is the practice of maintaining a non-judgmental state of heightened or complete awareness of one's thoughts, emotions, or experiences on a moment-to-moment basis, which can be extremely important while trying to understand and learn more about mental health. So let me welcome you to Mindful Thoughts. My name is Deloris, and I feel like my mission in life is to help break down those barriers around mental wellness by sharing personal stories, tips, and confessions of mental health to help us shine a light on mental wellness. So what are we waiting for? Let's dive in. Hey guys, I just wanted to jump in real quick and tell you how excited I am for you to hear today's episode. Today's episode is an interview with one of my favorite YouTubers, Kayla Nelson. When I reached out to her and asked her to be a guest on my podcast and she said yes, I was jumping for joy and was so excited. I've watched her for years and I've watched her talk about her struggle with mental health, and this is why I wanted to talk to her. Today, we not only discuss her story, but we also talk about the difference between the different generations of how they've dealt with mental health, to how people have this picture of what somebody struggling with mental health should look like. We cover the stigmas around, taking medicine and going to therapy. And we also talk about checking in with your happiest friends, because you never know what they're struggling with, and just letting them know that you're there for them when they want to talk. We also discuss so many other different things, but I'm so excited for you guys to hear this conversation. So without any further ado, let's just go ahead and jump in. So I am so excited to be able to talk to you today. Just so everybody knows, I am able to talk to one of my favorite YouTubers today, and I am so excited to have her here and to have her agree to come on and share her story with you guys. So hello, Kayla, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. This is so fun, and it's an honor to talk to you. You're so sweet.
And before we start, would you like to let people know a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Kayla. I like to say I'm a full-time person on the internet, but also a full-time employee in the real world as well. I just share a lot of my lifestyle content on YouTube, on Instagram, dabbling a little bit into TikTok, but sometimes I feel like I'm too much of a millennial for that, so I'm trying. I live in Charlotte. I have an adorable cat named Daphne who's all over my social media as well. And yeah, I also have a podcast called Girl on the Internet because I feel like that's just who I am these days on social media. I don't have a lot of credentials to give advice or not a professional vlogger or anything. I just am a girl on the internet. It's just who I am.
Yes, and I've listened to your podcast and it is so good. Like, just being a girl on the internet and sharing your information with the world on how you feel and, what you're going through, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I just like if I can relate to one person, right? If I can see one person's like online best friend, I'm like, that's good for me. Feels
Yeah,
good.
absolutely. So also, would you like to share your story with mental health as well?
Yeah, for sure. I feel like there are many layers to that, definitely. But I feel like naturally I've always been a relatively anxious person from like childhood. I just didn't really understand what that was at the time. I feel as well with that generation of older parents from that baby boomer population, like they didn't really acknowledge mental health as much, and it's to no fault of their own, just timing wise. So I didn't feel like I was able to get the proper resources when I was younger or really talk about it as much and understand that what I was going through and what I was feeling wasn't actually normal. And I feel like to some degree, had I talked it out when I was younger, it would have helped me prepare better for adulthood. But that's okay because I think you can get help with your mental health, anxiety, depression, whatever it is, at any point in life. Obviously, just the earlier the better, but
Yeah.
it's not a bad thing. Definitely anxious person. So I got diagnosed actually with generalized anxiety in 2021. I definitely feel like I've suffered with it for much longer, but that was finally when I took it with medical attention and got help for that. And for me, I guess what's been most successful for me was getting on medication to help with that anxiety, to kind of relax some of those anxious thoughts. And then going to therapy as well has been super helpful. That's just been the plan that has worked best for me. Doesn't mean that works best for everybody, but that's been what has been the most helpful for me.
Yeah.
And then just dealing with um, anxiety, and then also just like history of eating disorders and things that you don't realize are more mental health related than anything, especially in the world of food and eating. People just think it's like a behavioral, like you either do eat or you don't eat or you do these things, but it's really just, it stems from something else, and it actually is more of a mental thing than anything. So
Yeah.
dealing with that for a lot of my life as well. We're working on tackling that now in my late 20s, but that's kind of like my timeline, I want to say. There's more, but
Yeah.
summary wise.
Yeah. Yeah, because like you said too, I almost feel like our parents either dealt with it or it wasn't as like widely addressed as it is now. And like back then, if they dealt with something, it wasn't something they recognized or really like talked about. And like over the years, we've talked more about it and more people have opened up about it. And now when like we're going through stuff or going to therapy and everything, like our parents, it's hard for them to understand because for their
Mhm.
generation, they might have gone through it, but they just didn't understand it at the time. So when you go through it as we are and we're like, oh, we're going to therapy and we're taking medicine and we're doing all this stuff, like I think I don't want to say older generation, but like our parents and stuff are having like almost a hard time understanding it all because like I said, they either went through it and didn't know they were going through it, or it's just like something at their time that wasn't widely talked about.
Absolutely. I definitely think that and it is okay to say like the older generation, it's people that are sort of in that, what is it, like Gen X to like baby boomer sort of population, but more so like baby boomers and older. Like I just don't think it was as widely talked about. Like mental health wasn't really something that was as widely talked about. It was more of a taboo thing. It was like if you had a problem, if you were struggling with something, you just keep it to yourself, or I don't know, you just like keep working, you keep trucking along, you just suck it up in your marriage, and you just like keep moving along. And I think what's really amazing about these younger generations is we're acknowledging like, hey, if we're not happy, like we're going to address it. Like if we don't like the job we're in, we're not going to just like suck it up for 50 years and retire at this company and live that way. I think we
Yeah.
are more understanding of a multitude of options in our life. And if we're not just happy with those choices, if we're not happy in our relationships, in our work, with our own mental health, like we're going to try to do something about it. And I'm so proud of our generation for just being able to acknowledge mental health and talk about it and realize actually like everybody is probably going through something to some level of irrational thoughts or anxiety or something, because I like to say that if you are just like a human being existing on this earth with some kind of relationship with your family, a friend, a significant other, you have a job, you live some, like you are dealing with life. And I think that warrants enough a conversation about, well, how does that make you feel? What is running through your head? What worries you about life? Like what's going on? And I think that just grants these younger generations just to talk about it and just to do something about it. And again, like we're not the generation that will just stick it out in a horrible career for 60 years straight. Like we'll
Yeah.
change jobs if we're not happy, if we're not, feeling seen or heard. So it's definitely a good time to exist with that, to be a part of this generation that's like, no, let's acknowledge it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and also too, it almost educates them to when they get older and they have kids, then if their kids are going through something, or even like when we have kids, like for our generations, like we're going to be able to recognize things that our parents weren't going to be able to recognize. And I feel like the more we keep talking about it and acknowledging it and bringing it up and having a conversation around it, it's going to be easier for further generations and generations to say, I'm going through this. This is how I'm feeling. This is how you notice it. And it'll be easier for people to ask for help.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, I always say too that we, as a society, like forever, there's always been a need to go to the doctor when you don't feel well, or you go to the doctor when you break your leg, or when you need a heart medicine, or something for your diabetes, or something for fill in the blank. But we've never acknowledged, like, you know, your brain is quite the important organ in your body. And if something is not right, if you don't feel right, if you feel like you're struggling to get out of bed in the morning, if you have intrusive thoughts, like why would you not want to seek help for that as well? Like that's what's always shocked me is we'll see a medical professional for literally anything else, but when it comes to mental health, people are so much more hesitant, I want to say, maybe the right word, to do something about it. When in reality, it's like, that's just another part of your body. Why would you not want to do something about that? Or at least dive into the world of making your life feel a little bit more livable, less stressful, more calm, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's 100% correct. Is like we don't see our brain as like a medical thing where it's more like, oh no, I'm just feeling this way and I'm going through this. And you're like you said, if you go to the doctor for a broken bone, you go to a doctor because you're sick, you go to a doctor for whatever reason you go, like you can still go to the doctor for your mental health. And I think a lot of people, when they go to the doctors will ask them, like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? How's everything? And you're like, oh, it's fine and stuff. But really, you're like, no, it's not fine because you're going through something mentally. You just don't make that connection to say, oh no, I'm struggling with this and maybe I need some help, but like for some reason we're all not making that connection. And I know there's doctors like with my doctor when I used to go, like they would give me a piece of paper that I would ask me like, are you feeling depressed? Like all these questions. And like I feel like people just like, oh no, I'm not, because that's not what I'm here for. Like my doctor's not here to just to take care of that. They're here to take care of me being sick. And we need to make that connection to say, no, your doctor's there to take care of everything.
Yeah. And I think too that stigma of like you're like looking at that paper and you're like, I'm not depressed. I'm not the face of depression. That's not me. I don't like sleep on the couch all the time and cry every day. It's like, well, there's such a persona that we like picture in our head, or like what media portrays as someone who is depressed or
Yeah.
is like dealing with bipolar disorder or whatever. It's like, well, the face of mental health has no face. It just like can occur in anybody. And I think that's the thing too, because it's not something that you can typically see. Like if someone has a broken bone, you see them in a cast and you're like, okay, well, they clearly have something wrong with them at the time. But it's like, oh, you're depressed, but like you're happy, or like you're anxious. Like you don't look like someone who would have anxiety. You don't look like someone who would have depression. It's like because there is no face. It's like, you know, there is no face behind someone that's struggling with something. And even someone with depression can have a good day. It doesn't mean that they're just like in this cloud all the time, but it's
Yeah.
like there's no face and it can be anybody. And just because it's not a visual thing, it doesn't mean that someone is not dealing with that.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's hard for people to believe like I feel something they can't see. Like they want to be able, like you said, oh, when someone's sad and they're depressed, oh, they're crying all the time and they're miserable and they can't get off the couch and they can't get out of bed. It's like no, people who have depression go to work and they live their life and they smile and they laugh when they don't feel like it. And you might have somebody in your life that is struggling with something and you don't know because they're really good at hiding that from you because they don't want people to either be concerned or worried about them. So it's easy for a lot of people to hide what they're going through so nobody worries about them.
Yeah. And I think another thing too that, the older generation I've noticed can tend to push more toward this like agenda of like, well, if you're anxious, don't be.
Yeah.
Or just like go exercise, or like, what do you go hang out with your friends? Like, why don't you, are you eating okay? Are you exercising? Just stop. Just don't be depressed. And you're like, oh, that's like not how that works, but I do appreciate that. And it's like that's how it was for me. Like I went to my primary doctor. Obviously, I ended up now I'm with someone that focuses more on mental health, but still your primary doctor is your primary and like you can still head to toe explain what's going on. That's when I addressed a problem for myself and I was like, no, I'm actually doing all these things. I exercise frequently. I eat as well as I can. I socialize. I journal. I meditate. I XYZ. I'm doing all of these so-called like stress relieving, anxiety relieving, mental health saving activities, and I still have racing thoughts constantly. I still have all these like impending fears and irrational thoughts and everything else. So that's when I was like, I am doing everything that I possibly can as one person. And I think when you go to a doctor, when you reach out for help, whether they put you on medication, they send you to a therapist, they whatever, those are just more like think of it as like tools in your tool belt. It's not like a fix all. It's not like, boom, the medication's going to like cure your anxiety. It's a
Yeah.
forever thing, but it's like, yeah, you can take that medication, you can go to that therapist, you can do all these practices on top of the things that you were already doing to just make your life more sustainable in the sense of like, here's how I'm going to manage this. Here's how I'm going to feel a little bit better about myself. And it's not anything to be ashamed of. It's just, if you're going to live a happy life, if you're going to want to be the person that you want to be, it's like you can still take medication, you still can do all these things, and it's not something to be ashamed of by any means. And again, I think that's what our generation is trying to like explain. It's like, don't, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's not this like shameful sort of don't talk about it kind of situation. It's like actually more people than you would think are dealing with stuff like that. The happiest of people can be dealing with the darkest of things, and you just don't know it.
Yeah, and that's kind of like taking medication and therapy. It's like you like there are so many people that take medication or they go to therapy or they're doing all these things for themselves that you don't know about because that's not something that we talk about. Like we don't talk about, taking medicine. We don't talk about going to therapy. But for some reason we will talk about like eating healthy and working out and journaling and meditating and I'm doing all this stuff for myself, but it's like you're doing these other things that you don't want people to know, but you're saying, I'm doing all these things and this is what's helping me. But really, what's helping you is therapy and medication. You're just not telling people that you're doing that. So then when people are like, well, I'm doing all this stuff and this should be helping, why is it not helping? Well, that's because this person's doing extra stuff that you don't know that they're doing because they're not telling you that they're doing it.
And I think too, everybody is on such a can be on such a different um like wavelength of what they're dealing with. Like you can have generalized anxiety and it be just like a touch of it. And then other people who may have had like significant childhood trauma, PTSD, like they can have generalized anxiety and be way up here, or their medication prescription is, four times what you're taking. So it's the same in the sense of like, just because someone like works out, eats healthy, journals, like that may be all that they need to do. But the person that's like up here and has, 10 times more things going on, those things may not be quote unquote enough. Like they may have to do more. It's no different than any other health situation, right? Like someone could have high blood pressure, but just a touch of high blood pressure. So they only need
Yeah.
to do a few things to manage that versus somebody that may have like genetically high blood pressure and they have to do a ton of things to keep it managed. It's quite literally the same thing, just a different bodily organ. But again, we just don't acknowledge it because we just don't see it as such a primary thing to give attention to, I want to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, and that's why I like having these conversations with people because like like you said, you could be struggling with anxiety and I could be struggling with anxiety and the levels of it could be different and how we cope with it is
Mhm.
different. And it's like somebody could be struggling with depression and be sad all the time, and then somebody else could have depression and be having one day a week that they're feeling down. And it's like not everybody is struggling the same. And I think we need to realize that, like, you know, it's okay to be where you're at if somebody else is further along than where you're at right now. It's like almost like thinking about it like quick fixes. We want to fix it. If I go to a doctor and they give me medicine, like I'm going to be okay. And it's almost like saying, no, like this is a daily process. This is like could be for the rest of your life and figuring it out. And too much with like, I feel like not so much the newer generation, but like the older generation kind of in the middle with us is we want just the fix. How do I fix it? How do I feel better? How do I get over this? And I think the newer generation is realizing, okay, there is no quick fix. This is something that like I have to learn and go through and figure out, and we're almost stuck in the middle of like how do we fix it, but then how do we teach them like it's not a quick fix. You have to like go to therapy and you need to take your medicine and you need to find out what works for you, and then you just keep doing that until you feel better, or you don't need to do take the medicine or go to therapy, like, but it's something you deal with the rest of your life. Like it's not I'm gonna fix it and I'm gonna be good and then I'm never gonna have to deal with it again.
Yeah. Again, as I always say, I'm like, you're a human who's having to deal with real life stuff, real life situations, working, adulthood, relationships. Like, there are enough stressors in life alone, on top of any other childhood trauma or trauma in your adult life. Like, just existing is enough reason, I think, to get some kind of mental health help because it's life is hard. Life is like uncertain. Life is tough. It's we don't have a rule book for it. It's worth just like talking to someone and being like, actually, this is what I do all day long. And like, I stress about XYZ. And then you're like, oh, these aren't like normal thoughts that one person should be having. These aren't like normal coping mechanisms for stress. I should address that. I should do something about that. So whether or not you're even dealing, if you, that's another conversation of how people, they're like, when I say I go to therapy, when I say I take medication, they're like, oh, like I would have never guessed. Like, I don't feel like anything like really stresses me out. I don't feel like I'm particularly anxious. Like, I don't feel like there's anything like bad enough in my life that I need to do that for. And I'm like, well, I could say the same. I don't feel like right now there's anything quote unquote bad enough that would warrant therapy, but I'm still a human being that exists. And that's what I tell people. I'm like, you've been through something, whether you want to
Yeah.
admit it or not, you've been through something in life that would warrant like even just a conversation just to entertain like diving a little bit deeper into who you are and why you are the way you are in relationships and friendships and why the way you are at work, or maybe you cope poorly with stress or with deadlines or whatever it is. It's like it's just worth a conversation. It doesn't have to be this like you have anxiety and you have this like you must go to therapy. It's like, have you ever thought just going to therapy just to like talk out life or stressors in life or things you're dealing with? Because that's not, again, it's not something to be ashamed of by any means. You're just a human just trying to
Yeah.
exist. So
Yeah, because we think you associate therapy with something's wrong with you. Like, oh, something's wrong with you, or you're
oh,
dealing
they're
with
in
some,
therapy. Oh God, they're in therapy. Oh.
yeah. Or like you say, oh,
Um,
I'm in therapy, and you're why? Like you seem
mhm.
fine. Why are you in therapy? It's like because it helps me. Like it's something that like I like you said, everybody should be like at some point you go through something that you might want to talk about. Therapy isn't just for people that are struggling with mental health issues. It's you have a breakup, you're having a hard time, going through it. You can go to a therapist, talk it out, and feel better about it. Like anything in life that you lose a job, having a hard time coping with that, go to therapy, talk it out. Like therapy is not just for people that are struggling, it's for anybody who's going through something hard that you can't figure out and you want to seek help to get you through that moment in life.
Yeah, and that's the other thing too. It's like if you're not, um, I guess, diagnosed with some kind of mental health issue, it's like you can, like, there's always the option of like temporary therapy or temporary situational anxiety medication. Like, it's totally fine. It doesn't have to be this, like, no one is saying you have to have a diagnosis to do all these things. It's like you can just situationally go to therapy. I mean, that's like the whole reason, like, premarital counseling exists, like, marriage therapy, like child therapy, like all these therapies exist to help you just navigate life a little bit better. And then you can absolutely see a specialist if you wanted to, someone that helps treat people that just have bipolar disorder or just have OCD or something. So you can see a specialist, but you can also just, again, talk it out with somebody because you're just existing and living life, and you want to manage relationships better. You want to manage how to like maximize your happiness, how to whatever, fill in the blank. That's what therapists and people that are in those job lines, that's what they're there to do. That's what they're there to help with. They do so much more than just let me hear all your problems. Like, they're there to help you navigate life and be the person that you want to be in this life.
Yeah, absolutely. And something earlier that you said that stuck with me is I think people need to check on their happiest friends. Like, your happiest people in your life could be struggling with something and you might not even know it. And that's like almost like the one that comes to my head is Twitch from the Ellen Show. Everybody thought he was so happy. He was so like he was happy. He had this amazing job. He had this amazing family. He did TikToks with his wife, and then all of a sudden, like they were confused. Like, he was sad and he committed suicide, and like I don't understand, but he was so happy. And it's like, but really on the outside you could be happy, but on the inside not be. And it's like I think people are just like so confused because, like I said, you put up this front, I'm happy, I'm doing great, nothing's wrong, I don't want to concern other people. And it's like your happiest people are struggling and you just don't know that they're struggling.
And remember, that goes back to like, you don't see that because there is no face to depression. There is no face. The things that you see in movies and TV shows of people just like, I don't know, laying and sleeping all day and like their room is a mess. And like, that doesn't necessarily give you the idea of what it actually is. Can it be that? Absolutely. But that's not, I mean, people, like you said, high functioning anxiety, depression, like you still have to go to work, you still have to be a functioning member of society. It's like, yeah, it's because you don't see it. I mean, and it's really sad when the most well-known celebrities or whoever, they pass away because they just were fed up. One that sticks with me is always like Robin Williams. I'm like, when I learned about that, I was like, that's when I really started to, I think, take it even more seriously because it's so true. It's like, oh my God, he was like a funny, happy comedian. He was like all these amazing things, and you're like, him? Like, I think it shocked the nation because it's like, there's no way. Like, this dude was happy, right? Like, and then it's like, it's too late to try to ask all these questions. It's like he was not well deep down, and it's tragic. And again, I think that's what we're trying to do as a generation of like, don't make it too late. Like, don't like, check on your friends that are always happy. Check on your friends that are always willing to take on other people's problems. Check on your friends that are always asking you if you're okay or trying to help people solve the issues in their life. Those most helpful friends are probably the ones that are struggling the hardest or taking on everybody else's problems and like holding that with them, taking it every day with them. So
yeah, because I feel like when you do lose a family member or a friend in that way, the first question I feel people are asking themselves is like, I didn't know. Like I thought everything was okay, and I wish I would have known because I would have helped. And like they never said anything and they never talked about it. And it's one of those things where, like you said, more nowadays with the next generations, like it's coming to talking about it and figuring it out and being more open, but there is still a lot of us who are struggling and we're doing it by ourselves and we don't want to tell people. And then it's like when something tragic happens and it's like a shocker to people because I didn't know.
mm-hmm.
And it's like how could I have known? And it's like I think if we learn to, kind of almost like people watch our friends a little bit more, like did their attitude change? Did they say things that were weird? Did they stop hanging out? If we can notice things and pick up on things a little bit sooner too, we would be able to maybe be there for those people that were like, hey, yesterday you seemed off. Do you want to talk about something? I think that's a lot of time people struggling. They just want somebody to say, hey, if you don't want to talk about it, that's okay, but I'm here. Like, if you want
Yeah.
to cry and I'll sit next to you, that's what I'll do. Like, I am here for you. Whatever you need, when you're ready to talk about it, you can talk about it, but I'm here for you. And that's all I need you to know. And I think that's what most people struggling want, to have somebody just say, I might not understand, but I'm here. And when you're ready and when you need help and you want me to help you, then you let me know.
Yeah, and that goes a long way too. Just like a simple check-in is good enough because the person on the opposite end of that who is reaching out asking if you're okay, they might not know enough about it. Like you said, they may not understand it. They may not know what questions to ask, but just checking in on your friends and the people that you love, like, hey, just like checking in, how are you doing? How are you really doing? Like it's worth it just even texting someone, just being like, hey, just like thinking of you today, love you, like here for you, whatever. It goes a long way because we all lead such busy lives, and we're all guilty of not reaching out to people or talking to people that we haven't spoke to in a while, but it goes a long way just to like send someone a text, send someone something, a funny TikTok, just being like, oh, this made me think of you, whatever. Gotta just be there for people in
Yeah.
your life for sure.
Yeah, and that's why I always say too, like even saying hi to a stranger out out and about, or having a small conversation, or commenting on somebody's hair or outfit, or opening a door, and like you just never know what people are going through, and that one little act of kindness could be that little thing that has them turning their whole day around, or saying, oh yeah, like somebody said something really nice to me today and that gave me the boost to keep going. Like you never know what people are going through, and it's like people have bad days and they say mean things, but like always try to see the outlook of saying like they're going through something rough. How can I maybe do a gesture that's nice or say something nice, because you never know. But yeah, I that's why I always say just be nice to strangers, because you never know what somebody's going through. And like you said, your friends that you haven't talked to or someone for a long time, just shoot them a text. Hey, just thinking about you today. Hope you're doing well. Hope this finds you well. If you want to talk about anything, or if you know somebody is going through something, just even sending that text saying, hey, I know you were going through something rough. Just let me know if you need anything, or you want me to bring you something, or you want to talk about something. I think people just want that acknowledgement to know that they're not alone.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I loved having this conversation with you today. It was, but again, uh because nobody realizes how uh, much this was exciting for me, because you are one of my favorite YouTubers, and being able to reach out to you and you saying yes, just like I was like, oh my gosh.
You're so sweet. Stop
I
it. I
was just
love it.
I was so excited. Um, but before we leave, do you want to let people know where they can connect with you and be able to reach you?
Yeah, for sure. If you want to hang out with me on YouTube, you can just search my name. It's Kayla Nelson. I do a lot of like lifestyle vlogs. I mean, just like a little bit of everything. I just like to have fun and post videos. If you are interested in my podcast, it is Girl on the Internet. You can stream that pretty much anywhere that you can stream podcasts. I would say Spotify and Apple are the two biggest ones. Instagram, sincerely.kayla. TikTok is Kayla, obviously. I'm just kind of like all over, but if you go to one, you can probably find a link to the other things in that one spot. So, but yeah, I would just love anyone to come hang out. Just, I feel that my social media is a very safe space. I try to be very transparent, realistic. A lot of my videos on YouTube are like not wearing makeup, like just chilling, being a 27-year-old. Like, so it's a fun space, it's a safe space. So, feel free to come hang out.
Yes, and I'll put everything in the description so anybody can go find her podcast. I'll put all the links so you can go find her. And before we leave, I always have one question that I ask my podcast guests, and that is if you could give somebody a piece of advice right now that is maybe just got diagnosed or is going through having mental health issues, what would be one thing you would tell them?
Oh, that's such a good question. Um, I would say my biggest piece of advice is truly just don't feel ashamed. You are a human being dealing with life that does not come with a rule book. You may have children or a complicated relationship with your significant other, your best friend, your parents. Life is hard, life is tough. Do not be ashamed of having to deal with something if you're having negative thoughts, if you feel some kind of way about yourself or the life you're living, you're probably not alone in that. And it's worth reaching out, even if it's just your like best friend and being like, hey, I think I'm struggling with something. Like acknowledging it, asking for help is a huge step. And it actually makes you a lot stronger than you think. And just don't be ashamed of it. Just don't be ashamed. It's a normal thing at the end of the day, for sure.
Yes, I always say asking for help isn't a weakness, it's a strength. Like you
Absolutely.
having that moment to say, I'm not okay. I need help. And like you said, even if you reach out to a friend and you're like, hey, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. Can I talk to you about it? And even having that friend talk to you and maybe they mention, maybe you should go to the doctor or go to therapy or, do what you need to do for yourself. It's just having that step to say, like, I'm going to do something for me and I'm going to try to make it better. And that does not make you weak it at all. It makes you stronger to say, confess up and say, I need help.
Yeah, I think my little 2.0 bonus piece of advice would also be don't think that you're not bad enough to get help. There is no like criteria of reaching out for help. You don't have to be severely depressed. You don't have to be severely dealing with OCD. Like there is no criteria of don't think that you're not bad enough. Don't think that, well, I'm not like this person. I'm not like I'm still happy. I'm still like there is no criteria. If there's like a thought that runs through your head, that's reason enough to reach out. Of course, everyone can be dealing with it on different wavelengths, but your tiny bit of stress can be all the reason to get help. So don't think that you have to have this. You don't want to wait till it's too late, right? You don't want to meet this like end all criteria to think that that's when you need help. That would be my other piece of advice.
Yes, that's so good. Thank you so much again for being a guest on my podcast and chatting with me and sharing your story. And again, fangirling over here because nobody really knows. Like, I've watched you on YouTube for probably like a year now. And when I first found you, you were the one that was like, she does the things that I don't, so I don't have to do them. And then you started doing like little vlogs, and I've enjoyed them, and I know there's other people that enjoy them. And then you came out with a podcast, and I was like, yes, this is what I needed.
Yay. Oh my gosh. I love it. I am so happy to be a part of this podcast. Thank you so much for having me. It's been so much fun talking to you.
Oh my gosh, that was such an amazing conversation. And thank you so much again to Kayla for coming on and being a guest on my podcast. I know there's going to be something that you take away from today. And like always, remember to go over and give her a follow on Instagram, TikTok. Go watch her YouTube channel and definitely listen to her podcast because it is amazing. I know Kayla is going to be somebody that in the future I ask to come on because there is so much more we could have covered. Also, I want you guys to remember, always check up on your friends, always be there. And I know that the more we talk about mental health, the easier it's going to be for the next generations to openly talk about it and not be nervous or scared or feel like they're going to be judged. I loved this conversation, and I know you did too. So I will talk to you guys again real soon. Thank you so much for listening to another episode. And you know what would be so amazing? If you shared, left a comment, and liked this episode. Any type of support and love for this podcast is going to help it grow more and more every day. I'm so grateful to have you here, and I'll talk to you again soon.